Welcome to Map It Marketing for small business owners who want to become more confident and capable in their marketing. I'm Rachel Klaver and I'm a small business owner just like you. I've learnt that there are so many different things that we are supposed to do all the time. And trying to work it all out is, quite frankly, often very confusing. In this podcast, we're going to explore what those things are and whether you need to pay attention to them. Ready? Let's get started. I used to waste so much time creating content. So in this episode of Map It Marketing, episode 18, we're going to walk through how I'm currently repurposing the content from this podcast. And then I'm going to give you a more simplified approach for you to be able to use for your business. Now, I am going to go into depth and open up exactly how I'm doing all the content recreation. And it will be a bit overwhelming for some of you, but I really want you to come and walk with me on this journey. I started small. I started doing it a much more simpler way, and I've grown this as I've become more confident. This is an amazing way for you to create a consistent voice for your business. Repurposing content helps you get the same message over and over again. So if you've ever wondered how can you take one thing and turn it into a whole lot of other stuff, this is the episode for you. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Also, just so you know, I'm recording this in lockdown in New Zealand at the moment. And the only good place for me to record and get good sound is my car. So it's going to look a bit weird. I'm sitting in my car recording this if you're watching the video, but it does mean that the sound is better. And I hope you understand that I'd rather just do the podcast for you than not do it. So I hope you can forgive that with me. Hello, and I am coming to you from my car. If you're watching the YouTube video, you'll see I'm definitely sitting in my car in the garage because it's locked down and there is no other place that I can go where there's good Wi-Fi and good sound. So this is us. Now, I have got some notes today because I'm going to walk through with you, and I started writing down a little bit about how I repurpose my content. This podcast is all about how to repurpose your content so that you're using your content more mindfully, you're thinking about your target market, and you're also making the use of any effort that you put into everything, because marketing is effort. You know, it takes a lot to do things. And I shared a little bit that last year, I used to take creating content for granted. I find it easy to write. I've said this before in podcasts. And I learned last year we were very busy, and it was very easy to become distracted and fragmented. And I teach people during our Map It courses to be a spider, build a web. And I realized I was doing a very poor job of doing that myself. So I wanted to build a web of content that leads people to us and builds a long-term journey that builds trust with people when they come to us. And we're seeing the results of that. When people come and talk to us about working with us, the only reason really that they'd say no is if they haven't worked out the price point or something they can't afford. But besides that, people have got a trust relationship with us. And I want you to have that same trust relationship as you're doing your marketing. It doesn't matter whether you're a product-based business or a service-based business. That trust-based business relationship time takes time, but it includes creating a web that helps people interact with you across a variety of different platforms and using a variety of different content. When I'm creating a content map for us or web using this podcast, or it used to be a blog, so I'm going to walk you through that, I'm thinking about who my target market is and then trying to find as many different ways to talk to them through as many different forms to allow them to choose the way they want to walk towards us. And so I'm going to share with you today, and I'm a bit nervous about this because I'm worried. I don't care if other people know what I'm doing, but I am worried that potentially it will be overwhelming. So I want to preface this. The first thing is I'm going to tell you what I'm doing now. What I'm doing now compared to what I did in previous podcasts or with previous blogs, or even when this podcast first came out, is far more than that, which was 4 months ago. So one of the things I want to teach you, and which is really important, is you start small. So for example, I'm going to give you some examples of what you can do later on. But if you do a blog, your start small might be to write 3 social media posts related to that blog. That might be the first thing you do. And then as you do that and you become more confident, you might add some other things in there as well. You might add, okay, now I'm going to do a little video that relates to that blog. And oh gosh, now I can do this thing here. So I'm going to give you a whole lot of different ways to do things. But first, I'm going to break down to you exactly what I do to repurpose the content of this podcast. So I've got my notes here. So the first thing is I record my podcast on Zoom. Now, at some point, I might use something that's a bit more high tech, but I am all about doing things in the level that we're at. We have, at time of listening, we have on average around about 300 downloads per episode, 200 to 300 downloads per episode. And so at the moment, for me to go back to my husband, Rod, who's a CFO, and go, hi, I'd like to have super expensive equipment and other things, I have to prove the value of that first. So I am just doing it on Zoom. And as I'm doing it, I have a program called Otter.ai, which is on at the same time, and it is transcribing what I say. It has about a 92% success rate of clearly picking up my Kiwi accent, and it's transcribing everything I say. And I have that on for every podcast. So one of the tricks that I've learned around repurposing is set yourself up to make it really easy to collect the information you've got. Turning on Otter AI, which I didn't do right from the beginning, turning on Otter AI has allowed me to transcribe all the information and make it easier for me to find information for me to repurpose. So I do that first. I record it. Once this podcast is recorded, I upload it into a file, and it goes in there with an introduction and an outro that I do just on my phone. And those are given to my podcast editor to make up for this podcast. So that will happen. So that's not a task I do. And I think another thing that's important with this is I recognize that some of the people listening, so you listening today, you may have a team or you might be a solopreneur. So some of the stuff I'm suggesting to you is too much when it comes to running a business. But this is a good way to kind of go, this is where I could go or where I'm headed. So I have a VA who just does podcast editing, and they create my podcast, and they also load it up into my podcast platform. Now, we've already done a whole lot of work with that, so that when it's loaded up and it goes live, within an hour of it going live, it goes out to all the other podcast platforms so people can share it everywhere. And it has show notes in there that I've written with links, and that automatically gets sent out. It's like an automatic thing. So that's the first part of that distribution. At the same time, I'm recording this on Zoom. So you're seeing, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing me sitting in my car, I think with the laundry in the back. I've opened the garage to see. I can't even leave my car because it's locked down so I can't even go and park my car in a park. So I wouldn't have Wi-Fi then anyway. So our Wi-Fi is actually at the back here in our garage. So this is literally the best place for me to do this. So with it, we have the video, and what I do with that is the video that's recorded. With the Otter AI, I have a membership in there. So what it does is it can create a PDF of all the material and a transcription, but it also can create what's called an SRT file, which is a subtitling file. So what I do is I upload this video into YouTube with the downloaded SRT file, the caption file, and that automatically captions that. And then I schedule that to go live on the same day that my podcast is due to go live, which this week will be on this Friday. So I've done that. Then I go through the Otter AI material that's been transcribed, and I just read through it. And what I used to do is I used to print it off, highlight everything, and then I would rewrite those quotes and send them off to my marketing personal assistant or my marketing assistant for her to do it. Now, I've worked out a better way to do that now. So what I do now is this. I walk through it and I pull out quotes that I like and I highlight them and add a little note. And then I send that file to my marketing admin, and she turns those into single image posts that I can use on Canva. So she'll create them on Canva and saves them to a file. And she creates one that creates me a list of all those different quotes with an image of the podcast title that I can use as one post. And then she also gives me individual ones. So she's doing that. Now, again, I acknowledge my privilege as a business owner that I have someone else who can do that stuff for me. Then I have a marketing VA. And so with her, what I do is I go through that system again and I pull out quotes that I think would make good short form video. So anywhere from like 20 seconds to a minute and a half, 3 minutes. And I highlight those and I give her the YouTube chat title. And what I use is I use a program called answersocrates.com, and I Google the topic that I'm on, and I find a Googleable phrase that people are asking for, and I make that the title heading that is relevant to the material, and I give all of those, and then she does a huge process where she will go find that clip, make a short video clip on a program called, I think it's called Online Print Color. I'm going to put all these into the show notes. And so she cuts short bits of video, she loads them up into a program called Get Subly and subtitles them, and then she loads them up into YouTube. She reversions those sizes as Instagram ones, as square images, and she puts those ones into a file for me to be able to use for social media content on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and also TikTok. Now, that's a new thing. I've only been doing that for 2 weeks. So that's what I'm trying to say. This is the sort of thing that you can do. But imagine all that power of having all that material that's just done. And I couldn't do that if I didn't have, I was doing a little bit of it myself, but it was too overwhelming with everything else I had to do. So I've done that. So she loads those clips up, she adds into a Google Drive for me, and she puts them on a nice spreadsheet because she's far more organized than I am. Then what I do is I pull out key points from the podcast using some of those quotes and ideas, and I write a column for stuff.co.nz. Again, I'm acknowledging my privilege that I get to have an amazing place where I can write columns to help people. So I write a column in Stuff, and I add in any links to the guests that have been there, or products or platforms that I'm using, so that people can also use them. And then I send that column that I've written to a blog writer, Erin, who we really love and rate, and she rewrites it. So I've been using Erin. Last year I started using her where I would just walk through, and I'll talk about this later. I'd make some notes around blogs and give it to her writing it in my own language. This is a rewrite, so it's not seen as duplicate content for SEO. It's a separate article or blog or column than the one that's in the Stuff magazine articles and paper, so that I can then put it on my New Zealand or Australian identifymarketing.co.nz website. So now you're already starting to see that there's this really big, diverse thing. The podcast itself goes on rachelklaver.com/podcast, which you are always asked to come to if you want to see the show notes with all the links in it. And so this starts creating this web of content, but I'm not finished there. Like, I am taking this really seriously in terms of how I can really make this time and value in this podcast valuable, not just to me from a marketing perspective, but also just for my readers and my listeners and people who want this information, that people get to have it in the way that they learn best. I love listening to podcasts. Not everyone does. I like watching YouTube videos, but I have a short attention span. So I know other people like them. I don't so much. I love reading. Other people don't. So I'm trying to find ways to give the most value to people across a widest variety of ways to do that. So then I use those key points from that podcast and from that column. I pull them all from there, and I use them to write content related to carousel posts on Instagram. So a carousel post is one that has more than one image, so that when you go to the post, you have to scroll through to read it. And they're really big on Instagram at the moment because they help people stay on Instagram for a longer period of time. And I give those to my marketing admin person to design up for me. I write all the content that she designs them up for me. She shares them so that I can schedule them in. I'm currently scheduling them in because I'm writing captions. Again, these are things, if I was bigger, I could probably outsource. If I was smaller, I would probably have to do the whole thing. So I'm in that kind of in-between space here in terms of what I'm doing. I then use that material to plan out stories for Instagram that I'm going to use in relation to the content for that week. I also use those ideas from that content to create reels and TikTok videos that are over and above those short form videos that I already have. And then, so I've done all that. Doesn't it? It sounds a lot, and it is a lot. Like, I am trying to really make sure that the time I spend in my podcast is valuable time that helps push out to everybody else around a whole range of different areas. Then what I do, and this is a new thing in the last 6 weeks, I now create 12 Pinterest pins that link to the podcast, and I schedule those into a scheduling app called Tailwind, where I can choose my boards and I can have those in there, and they will roll out over that next month with links back to the website, rachelklaver.com/podcast, to the episode, so that people picking up and wanting to listen to the episode can. So that is an evergreen SEO strategy that I'm using to help raise the profile of that podcast, but also it's allowing people to share content on Pinterest. I then also do exactly the same thing with the blog that comes up once it goes live on the website that's related to the same topic, and will have a link to the podcast at the bottom often, or a link to the YouTube video. That too will have 12 Pinterest pins made for it. And again, those will be recorded and scheduled into Tailwind so people can get them. I don't know. Whew, are you puffed yet? Like, this is quite, like, when I wrote this down, I was a little bit like, hey man, am I going into overkill? But I'm really passionate about making this web that works really well for me. And I will tell you, this is working really well for us as a business. Then my one podcast gives me all this relevant, in-depth and added value content. So I've got content on my podcast platforms around the world. I've got content on my YouTube channel. I've got content for TikTok, for Pinterest, for Facebook, for Instagram, and for LinkedIn. Those are the platforms that I use. And plus I have content for my 3 websites, rachelklaver.com/podcast. I've got it for identifymarketing.co.nz, identifymarketing.com.au. All of those have content on them related to the podcast that I do once a week. So people can consume via audio, they can consume via video, they can consume via written, and they can consume long, medium, or short form posts. I'm trying to help people get the information we have, because I have this burning desire to help people with marketing in the form that they need it most. And I feel like this is the way forward in terms of creating a web of content, is making sure that you're serving people in the way they want to be talked to, as opposed to me deciding, I'm only going to do blogs, or I'm only going to do video, or I'm only going to do reels. I am trying to do it across the board to help people learn the best way. So I post and share on my podcast channels, my 3 websites, Instagram, Facebook groups. I also often add extra value in terms of question and answers and stuff like that in my Facebook group, Map It Marketing, which you can obviously also join and ask questions about this podcast or other podcasts, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Pinterest. And in terms of time, because it is a lot, in reality, I've kind of chalked it up. In reality, all in all of that takes about 20 hours a week amongst the 3 of us that are doing it. Probably with Erin, maybe 22, 23 hours a week. That's a lot. And so I want to acknowledge that as well, that I am in a place where I can do that because our business has grown to a place where I have more time. I have been given more time as a business owner to really focus on our marketing. I also acknowledge that I have people I can afford. Our business is in a place I can afford to pay other people to do things. I am in a place where the structure is possible for that to be maintained over a long period of time. And I know that that's not possible for everybody. And so now I want to break that down into what you can do for your own business, because that's everything that I do. And I probably do a bit more than that, to be honest. And what I'm trying to do is do more every month, try and add something else on to create that web. But I will tell you some other things that I have done in the past that I'm not currently doing using this podcast, but I have done for other bits and pieces. So other things you could do that I have done is you can create a webinar on the topic, and have it more in depth so people can sign up to a webinar. You can create a free or paid resource coming out of it. And I have definitely done that with some of the podcasts that I've done before. And in fact, with this one, I do have an infographic that shows a more simplistic view of this. And I'm going to make that a resource that you can have while listening to this podcast. We will just take your email for that one, just because it is one that we use for our clients, but there'll be nothing else in there. We'll just add you to the Map It Marketing podcast email that goes out every week. That's all you get. So if you'd like to have that, you can. And then I've done checklists with an email capture like that. And sometimes we've added a series of emails to get people to come and buy. So nurture sequence with a series of emails to do that. So repurposing, once you start it, boy, is it hard work to get your head around. But when you start to see the results, it is completely and utterly compelling and very addictive. So allow me just to move this off here and just talk to you about how to do it on a simpler perspective. So last year when I started, I wasn't doing it like that. It was a lot more simpler. I used to start with, I wrote down a list of 10 blogs I would like to write that fitted our core clients for the year and thought about what I was going to do. And I started off with the first one. And I did use a blog writer for this. And if you're not a writer or you're busy, I highly recommend using the time to get a blog writer that you can trust who can help write this initial content. Because if they help you do this, then everything else spins off from it. And so what I did is for example, one of our blogs was around things that you should do if you're an e-commerce store to improve your sales. So what I did is I wrote some notes. I wrote the notes out on a Google Doc, and then I actually used Loom, which is a recording video thing, just to talk through all the points. Now, I could probably now use AI to transcribe that and then write my own column for it, but I didn't. I just gave it to Erin, our blog writer. I gave her the Loom video with the outline, and then I said, could you write this up for me? So she wrote the blog using my words to do that. So you can write a blog that's in depth about a topic that's important to your customers. Then you can break it down. You can write 2 to 3 posts for social media, taking key points from that blog and adapting it slightly, just adding an introduction and a small call to action at the end of it to cause it to be a post. That's a repurposing. You can create a single image that has a quote from your blog and then talk about it, and that's another post. You could do, if there's 7 tips or 5 tips or 3 things you should do, you can create a carousel post, those images that slip together. You can have those going through as another post that you can use on Instagram. You can if you do that on Canva, you can download that also as an MP4, a video, as a looping video, and then you could use it on Facebook or on LinkedIn. You can use a carousel post that you designed for Instagram, by the way. Instead of downloading it as a PNG, you can download it as a PDF and then upload that into LinkedIn, and it looks like a carousel post, which is kind of clever. You upload it as a document. You can share all your posts on more than one platform, which helps spread that out. And then you could do some short video talking about little tips of it and share them as reels, add them to stories. Anything that's under a minute, you can just load up and it will just show as a story. Or creating it as a TikTok video or adding it onto YouTube. One thing I did forget to say about YouTube is that if it's under a minute, I add the hashtag short at the end of it, and then YouTube shares them as a short only on mobile phones only, and they're getting a really good reach, which is why I've kept those clips long. But that's a very simple way of doing that. Yes, you can add in Pinterest. Yes, you can add in YouTube. Yes, you can add in all these other things, all the crazy stuff that I'm doing. But when it comes down to it, the simplest thing to do is just to start small, get one piece of content. And look, if you're not a blogger, think about doing a video and taking the information out. Do a presentation, create a presentation, slideshow presentation, and record yourself doing it. Create that as a long video and then use AI to transcribe it and pull information out. The trick is to think like a spider and build a web. And when you do that, the magic starts to happen and your marketing starts to feel cohesive. It starts to make sense and it starts to make a web that people don't want to escape out of, and they want to come a little bit closer to you. I'm going to share a few little things that you can do in the outro, but other than that, I hope that you are safe and well, that you're not having to hang out in your car like I am all the time. And I very much hope that this has been helpful for you and that your head hasn't exploded too much with the way that I repurpose my content from this podcast. So today we walked through how to repurpose your content, and I want to give you some really simple step-by-step tips to getting started if you're starting completely from scratch. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to think of one good meaty topic. So it can be a blog topic, it could be a webinar, it could be a long video of something that you know that your people want, that you can serve them with, and map out a really clear plan of what would be in that.
and create that content. I think one of the things I realized was it's so important to make sure that your content is something that your followers and the people that you want to work with want to read and know. So think about that first. Having a meaty topic makes it much easier to repurpose your content once you go to do that. And then just start slow. Think about when you publish that blog, how you will share that content in more ways than just sharing links out across different platforms. There is a place for that. I do that as well, but that isn't repurposing content. That's just sharing that content onto different platforms. So think about how you do that and start small. As I suggested, start with maybe pulling out a quote and turning it into a static square image. Start with creating a series of posts in relation to the topic. Start by using a caption based around a part of the blog and then adding an image to do it. Start slow, start thinking of ways to redo that. And do what I don't do, but what I recommend you do is when you write a post that's great, save it into a spreadsheet so you can use it in 3, 6 months or a year's time, again, repurposing that content from there. The whole idea from this is not to become a crazy content machine like I have in terms of creating new content every week. You could use this once a quarter or once a month and create really good quality content that just continues to be shared out in different forms year on and year out to serve your community. So think about doing a slowed down, pared back approach to what I'm doing, but take aspects and ideas out of it and slowly layer up from a small place of starting with a blog and a few posts to adding video, adding short form video, Pinterest pins and other forms to help you create that content bank to help people be captured in that web and walk through.
Thanks for tuning in today to Map It Marketing with me, Rachel Klaver. Make sure you hit subscribe in your podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you want notes or information about today's podcast, go to rachelklaver.com/podcast for more information.